And then you have other things like the Ubatuba event, where we find extremely anomalous magnesium ratios in one of the samples. The other samples look normal. Why is that? How is that? I've got multiple examples now of molten aluminums or aluminum rich materials. Okay, why is it always aluminum?
Hmm.
Are there similarities? Does this imply some sort of common process that's producing them?
In your talk, in your opening, I think it was the opening talk at the Soul Foundation conference, it was a few months ago now. You start off kind of by saying something I found noteworthy. You said, I have the tools, the interest, and I have a good friend. And you were referring to Jacques Vallée. You spent some time talking about studying and bringing in other experts to study material, physical material that you had in your hands that were allegedly part of anomalous experiences that other people had around the world. So,
Right. Objects that they'd seen that claimed to have dropped something or left something behind.
you talked about, again, going back to the data, that you wanted to be sure of what you were looking at in some of these objects.
Mm-hmm.
Can you pick out one of your favorite objects of the three or four that you mentioned in that, and explain what it is that you saw and what data you've put together to ask more questions?
Right. Well, so the first objective of this is to collect enough things to be able to see the extent to which there are similarities and differences in the materials. Almost
Mhm.
all of the material that I've seen to date are, say, left behind molten metals. How does a pile of molten metal, you know, uh, 10 feet across, end up in the middle of a field, far from any place where it might have otherwise been, manufactured or carried?
Mhm.
Uh, and so, that doesn't mean it's from a UAP. It just means it's interesting. Um, when you associate it with an observation or a witness observations, and then police reports and pictures from the police with Polaroids of the stuff, the whole event takes on a reality of some sort.
Sure.
So the more you have these kinds of cases, the more, for me at least, it's worth paying attention to and saying, okay, well, look, it's unlikely that I'm going to be able to prove anything, but I can collect the data, and the data itself is interesting, which is, here's the kinds of metals that are in it. Here's how they're, in one case, the Council Bluffs that I'm just talking about now.
Mhm.
It's not fully mixed material. What does that mean? I don't know, but that's interesting. And then you have other things like the Ubatuba event, where we find extremely anomalous magnesium ratios in one of the samples. The other samples look normal. Why is that? How is that? Um, I've got multiple examples now of molten aluminums or aluminum rich materials. Okay, why is it always aluminum?
Hmm.
Are there similarities? Does this imply some sort of common process that's producing them? And so, all I'm doing is saying, okay, now I have enough things that are aluminum to say, that's starting to become a pattern. What does it mean? So all I want to do is just is get out there that data, and with enough backed up methodology that says I did it credibly. And somewhere out there in the greater human, intelligence, someone might make a connection. Or, if I go to the great beyond without ever having solved it, 100 years from now, somebody might dig it up and go, "Oh, there's this guy Nolan who had all this data, and it kind of matches some of the stuff that now we know." Or, maybe after the aliens land on the White House lawn and say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right.
that was our waste disposal unit. Sorry about that."
No, it's well. So this is what I appreciate about this, because your conclusions are really questions. Your conclusion is,
Yeah.
here's the data. This is what I've done. Why?
I'm going to use that. Really good. My conclusions, to the extent that I have any conclusions or questions.
Yeah. So Avi Loeb taught us that as well in discussing with him is like, why wouldn't you have a childlike mind in your question making? Like, what is
Yeah.
stopping you from asking, why not? And just for the listener, because I recommend the listener to listen to your talk in the Soul Foundation. And again, we'll put the details in the show notes. But in a few of these, like the Socorro, the Council Bluffs, the Ubatuba material, you state in your slides that the materials show no sign of technology, but there's a clear sign of industrial process and engineering. And your question is why? So,
Right.
anyway, that's why I just wanted to reinforce that
Yeah.
point.
No, it's just why. It's just they're they're not naturally formed. That's
Yeah.
indisputable. I can come to that conclusion. There's no natural process that dumps 30 pounds of you know iron, nickel, etc., in the middle of a field, uh, above which was seen and what can only be described of as a UFO. Okay, so why? What is it? So I mean, but I think what that's about is, in the context of trying to teach the world how to do this kind of work, is the anecdotes are preliminary data. And as I've talked many times, I've had my own experiences of a variety of types,
Mm-hmm.
very sporadic, but indisputable. Um, but stories are not science.
Mm-hmm.
Individual stories, especially, are not science. All they can do is provide a kind of fuel for me to want to understand what it was that I saw.
Right.
And then secondarily, I want to use science to convince other people that, hey, there was something here that was worth studying. And it's a bigger thing because I'm not the only one who saw exactly the kinds of things I saw. So science is about repeatability. There is repeatability. It's just not on call. There's repeated observations of similar things.